Good morning to all of you. I think that's just a little, you okay? All right, Dennis is on it. First of all, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. We know that you have lots of other things you can be doing. If you need a reward at the end, Dairy Queen is open on Sundays, some of them, and a blizzard would be just perfect, I think. I may do that for myself, whether you do or not. Let's start with a prayer, if we could, please. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks, for you have blessed us in extraordinary ways. We appreciate your patience with us as we look to find ways to glorify you, to serve in the mission and ministry you have given us. We pray that you would guide our thoughts, our discussions, our conversation with one another, so that your peace reigns and your people remain as one in you. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. I know you might think that this is pretty simple to do, but in all honesty it is not. Let me describe just briefly why it isn't. Years ago, we had a member, Fred Winkler, who worked over in the Bay Meadows area, was one of the lead people there. And he told me about a Myers-Briggs that they did for his company. But instead of analyzing and putting you into a quadrant, this one was much more extensive, and especially looked at people's nature, how they functioned in operations, in decision-making. And so, as I remember, there were different colors. So when you went into Fred Winkler's office, his name was there on a board, and next to it was a round dot of a particular color. Red, green, yellow, whatever, blue, whatever it was. And it was saying to you, who were giving a report perhaps to Fred, how that report needed to be laid out. So if you had, take for example, if you had a yellow dot, you were a person who on the report wanted to receive all the data, the information, what is the context, what's the challenge, what are the opportunities, how do those compare, and the last page is the description of your recommendation to that person of what needs to be done. There's varying degrees of that, and at the other end, there is the red dot, as I remember it. Fred was one of those guys. In that red dot, if you had a red dot, you wanted to see the recommendation on page 1, sentence 1. We need to do this. And all the data that followed in the report was supporting, giving the information, giving the context. But that person wanted it right up front. We have people who are all over the board when it comes to how you want to receive your information. For those that are decision makers, the red Fred guys, I'm going to ask you to be somewhat patient. We're going to do this as quickly as possible, but I hope you understand. We have people who joined months ago, and we have people who joined 30 years ago. We have people who have been through the whole project. We have people who are looking online who have never been to the Lakeshore. So we've got some gaps to fill in, we've got some work to do to try to briefly summarize how we're here, and then as we get toward the end, we'll describe what the council is recommending and what we think is going to be best for the congregation. I would expect that those of you sitting around here know and have seen the blessings of God in this place. And you've seen dedicated efforts on the part of the congregation and the membership. What I would ask you to do is to pull out those 4 sheets of paper that you received, stapled, and we're going to look at that. we're going to try to show you the foundation of the recommendation that we have. Just briefly, on page 1, it has a diagram with a chart and a spreadsheet. Always begin with a spreadsheet. What you see there is the history of Shepherd of the Woods up to 2019. We have not completed the year, so that data is not included. But it gives you a picture of what has been happening here as a congregation. If you look at the top left, columns A and B, it's talking about years 1980 through 85. I was not able to find that data. The congregation did not spend a lot of time focused on that. And in fact, when I came in 1989, I found no one was aware of the fact that in 1992, that mission church, Shepherd of the Woods, was going to have to refinance its debt. It had $390-some thousand worth of debt, and they were unaware that there was an 8-year balloon on their 20-year mortgage. So when I found it, and the reason I know that is because I found it in the documents and then went about trying to find out what anybody thought we were going to do about that. Because the loan capacity in those days through the life insurance, AAL or Lutheran Brotherhood, was $1,000 per CCC, confirmed contributing communing adult. So they just looked at your numbers and they said, that's how much money, times $1,000. Well, at the time we had about 60 members altogether, which made our loan capacity $60,000. But that was the beginning, so I didn't have those records. And what you see in the row going across 4 and 5, these are worship attendance numbers. And just to give you that idea, the membership numbers are not a good indicator because it's very difficult. We have so-and-so's great-grandson is a member of this church. Hasn't been here in 2 years, but grandma is an active member of the church. For us to go and tell grandma or the kid, you're not participating, we are not going to count you as part of the membership, grandma has an absolute conniption, either goes to her creator or to the bishop and says, what is this church doing? So that's the rationale, why you see the numbers there. The average, it says 4A, is the average worship attendance over the entire year, and the row below that is the percentage increase or decrease over the previous year. That is correlated to the graph at the bottom, so you can see it visually. And you see in 1990, the first year we were really focused on what we were called to as mission and ministry that I was involved with. The growth in worship attendance was 28.9%. Anybody who hasn't found that, you're going to lose everything else. Flash your lights if you don't know where I'm talking about. That's G5. And the next year, 27, and the next year, 19, and then 10, 7, 21, 16, etc. What you see is a development and a growth in the church that challenged us. I'm going to show you some other data about that, but what you see by the time you get over to R, you might take some notes on this, in 2001 is when we built the sanctuary. But the years before that, column H is 1991, that was the first extension we did, 1,000 feet of the gathering area where Rhonda's office and Jackie's office are. That was built in 1991. 93, we built the Shepherd Center, 179 worshipers per week. So we're about 100 up. 1995, the garage and the back patio. 97, the 4 classrooms, which we are still modifying. In 1999, the gathering area and the secretarial offices. 2001, everybody knows, that was the sanctuary. That's a 5,600 square foot sanctuary with a balcony, seating, according to the plans, 300 worshipers. That's 2001. In 2003, 2 years later, we had gone from 307 worshipers in 2000. By the time we had the sanctuary with room for worshipers, because 2000 was in the fellowship hall, we had 356. The next year's 361. In 2003, we had 384. That was the average. So there were some Sundays with 250 or 300, but also some Sundays with 400 and 450. So it made it ineffective. That's what we found. The building was not capable of inviting or welcoming any other people. And in 2003, the congregation, anybody there, flash your lights if you were a member in 2003. The vote was that year by 85% to sell Southside property. Sanctuary was put up 2001. 2003 was the first vote to sell everything, based on the fact that it was not effective for mission and ministry. You could park no more cars, you could put nobody else in the seats. At that point, the discussion was raised, what will we do? You could just lock the door, you could put a limit on how many can come in, but it was ineffective in more ways than you could count. So the first thought was that we would divide the congregation. We would take some members, find some land, start a church over there, keep Southside, and the congregation did not want to do that. Neither the council, the other pastor I had at the time, or the members. And so the decision was made that we would pick up and move lock, stock, and barrel to another property. While we were waiting to decide and find where that would be, we set up strategic committees to have them look at what we would do. And the assignment was the same, regardless of whether they were looking at kids in Christian education or seniors or social ministry. The assignment was this: if we did not have the limits of 2.75 acres, which is the size of the Southside property, what would we do in ministry? So the senior group, led by Kim Lufbury, went around, found out what is the need of seniors, what could we provide, and they came down with the idea of a senior center. Kind of a high-rise perhaps, or low-rise, but some way to be able to care for seniors in independent living, and we would help them with their assistance. So instead of going into assisted living and nursing, they could bypass assisted living. So that was a dream that was held, and they went down to South Florida, looked at other churches that had done this, and needed about 5 acres to do it. Similarly, the school, the idea was to put in a school, and the land ought to include, because we want to serve all the kids we could, including a high school and playground fields, etc. We also looked at social ministry. We also looked at retreat center, and that's why the assignment was for the location committee, find land that would handle 40 acres and allow us to do all kinds of ministry. 2004, we were at capacity, vote to sell. Then the property was put up for sale for $2.7 million. Southside's price, if you wanted to buy it, $2.7 million. That included, as I remember it, $400 an acre for land. We didn't just make the number up. That's what land was selling for on A.C. Skinner, just up the street, that goes over to the infamous St. Luke's Hospital there. They were going to sell us land at $400,000 an acre. The buildings we had put up, we were going to sell for $70 a square foot. That, in my memory, is the way that went. That's where the number 2.7 million came from. So we found the Lakeshore property and began to use it for ministry. The tent we worshiped in, converted the barn after a year into a sanctuary, built the faith center, added the classrooms, the modulars for the kids, and did our best. In 2006, the vote went back to the congregation. We were doing ministry here, we're doing ministry there. The 100% vote, you almost never get this, vote was 100% to keep both properties. Now that's a significant decision. It means the debt that is started out at about $3.2 million was going to be covered by both groups of worshipers, and the development on this property would be dependent upon increase in giving that would allow us to develop it. We won't have $2.7 million, though we designed 5 buildings to go up around here. We did not have the money to do that. Let me see. You see the increase in the graph from 2004 until 2009 is a plateau. Partly are moving around, and if you were a visitor and walked in 2003, you saw excited people who were moving. That's not a church you'd like to identify with, so the numbers were affected by that, especially when it came to visitors. The challenges were serious for us, and the options: do nothing, divide the congregation, move the entire congregation, selling Southside property, which failed. In 2004, we found the Lakeshore, added that to our assets. We bought it for $1.6 million, plus $100,000 in closing costs. We had about $500,000 in infrastructure, bringing in the roads and power and sewer and lift station, etc. And then also $600,000 or more for the Faith Center and additional costs for the other buildings, all of which we did by the donations of the members. The mortgage, in the meantime, was continuing to be paid. All right. I don't have an easy way to ask if you had any questions about that, but let me just look and make sure I've covered everything. All right, if you would, turn to page 2. On page 2, you see data that comes, there's more data than this, but I pulled these out. Over in column A, it's the year going across the top, and then received by. How many new members and where did they come from? And then also the percentages between those affirming their faith and those who are transferring in from another Lutheran church body or other. And then down below, starting at 17, 18, we have the total added, total removed, increase or decrease, and then I've added back in the average worship attendance to see what happened. And you can see that there was a decline that developed in the congregation. If you just scan back to page 1, you see that decline began about 2009, 2010. We're going to talk about where that came from. So on page 2, looking for the causes of the decline, but just to go over that graph, you see from 1987 to 2014, I didn't have time to work the other data in there, but baptism of kids, they become a member. Baptism of adults, that is, I am deciding to follow Jesus. I am making that as a faith statement. I am not transferring my membership from another church. Those are the ones that are a reflection of our doing our evangelistic work. The other transfers, they moved into the neighborhood, they were looking for a church. It's not bad to have a transfer, but the ones that really stand out is the number of those affirming their baptism. And then rows 6, 7, and 8 are the transfers. What I would point out to you in row 13 and 14, there you see the percentages of those who are affirming their baptism. So 1990, 61%, 65% the next year, 62%. 2 out of every 3 people who join the church do not have a transfer. These are not lifelong Lutherans. They are people who are excited about the faith and joining a church, likely for many of them for the first time. And then all the other transfers. You see by 2001, column O, that by that time we had 45% affirming, 42, 56, 65, 51, 57, 42. But what is having an impact is 38, 48, 31, 35, 35, 45 percentage of people who are transferring in. Now here's a telling number which we have to pay attention to. Row 18, 19, and 20. If you were to say, my gosh, look at that, in the year 2004, Shepherd of the Woods had 168 people join. The words, thanks be to God, this is phenomenal, this is great, but also that is a tremendous challenge to assimilate 168 people. Look underneath that. We had 168 people join, but we also had 115 people move out. That area where we were had a lot of people coming and going in their businesses and everything else. So although we had 168 people added, our total membership increase was 53 because of the people leaving. So what you have at the time of 29 and 10, 2009 and 2010, those of you who are around would remember the ELCA issues, and we ultimately decided to leave the ELCA. With that, there aren't any transfers coming from the ELCA. So we have both locations, but we are now a church that is aligned with LCMC and NALC, which are very much smaller churches, and we have very few transfers. I don't know if we ever tracked the number of people from, a minimal number from NALC or ALC. So you'll see that by 2010 and 11 and 13, we're less than 20% of the congregation is coming from any kind of transfers altogether. So in 2010, when we left the ELCA, we had 2 immediate problems that developed. One was the loss of transfers. That became a challenge for us. And the other, a visibility issue. About 10% we track when you join. We ask you, how did you first know there was Shepherd of the Woods? And somebody will say, well, I was driving by, I saw the sign, or I saw the church. No one ever joined the Lakeshore by driving by and seeing that sign. We're at a cul-de-sac in a business park. And so that was, in our past, on average, about 10% of our new members came from that. And we dropped about 25% of the transfers from ELCA. So beginning in 29 and 10, we ended up with an automatic loss of about 35% people joining the church. And when you have some years 5 or 10% increase, you then have a 25% loss. There's also the addition, if any of you read any of my sabbatical stuff, a change in the society right about that time, 2008, 10, and on, where the society no longer considers the church an essential asset, a gift to the community. Not all, it's not 100%, but it used to be 100% people felt the church was significant. It's where our churches, our schools, our orphanages, our hospitals, all came from churches. And now that they're not considered that. So people don't walk in to a new house in Jacksonville, moving in, and the next Sunday go to church. That was an event years and years ago, but no longer. So that is a way to see some of the impact. Page 3. These are a set of worshiping attendance. The top one is Lakeshore, bottom is Lakeshore and Southside combined. And what you've got is month by month, our comparison. When we look, oh, look, the worship attendance went up 10 from last month. Doesn't matter. That's not the issue. Summer worship is different from Christmas worship, obviously. So we compare apples to apples. So when we're looking, for example, at 2008 January, and it went to 43 worshipers, we look at the year before, when in January there were 62. Now, we're down south, and weather does have an impact. And we did not yet have the Faith Center, so if it's cold, we're in the barn, or at a point, we're in the tent. Weather has tremendous impact on the Lakeshore. At the bottom, you see the numbers month by month. If they're in red, that is a decrease from the previous year. So you see the numbers there. In 2010, we had 367 worshipers. That's a 10% drop for the year from 2009, which had 408 worshipers totally. The Lakeshore had younger families, and to this day does, and so you see in 2012 and 2013, the average overall was 91 worshipers every Sunday on average for the years 2012 and 2013. And when you look at the total combined, it was down 6% at Lakeshore and Southside. So we were dropped 20 worshipers per week from 12 to 13. And so that has had its impact on the development of the Lakeshore, and there was its high point. You can see up in 14, 15, and 16 up in the Lakeshore spreadsheet where those were dropping 10 or 12 to 17% per year. And we then went to change some of the preaching scheduling, also added in the pews, making it a little bit more like church. Page 4, if you would, the Vision for Mission Support. This is an extraordinary page. It is showing you, starting in March, which was just before our normal appeal, Sunday in April, but people give in March already for the new. So we have this record, and it starts in row 5. That was March of 04, which is when we bought the Lakeshore. Okay? And March alone was 73,000, April 76, May 67, June 79. You go across, and the first year of a 3-year appeal in column O, $1.5 million in the first year of that 3-year appeal. The next year, 378, the next year, 285. If you look in column P, it says the total of the 3-year appeal was $1.2 million. The average for the year was 403. If you take a look at R and S for a 1, 2, or 3-year appeal, the surplus down below is going to be geared off. Our mortgage for 1 year is $227,000. Now it's $227,724, and 2-year appeal $455,000. If you take a look at column P, you see the first 3-year appeal, 1.2. The next 3-year appeal, 1.1 million. The next 3-year appeal, 846. Part of the impact of that was we have not been able to develop pretty much any of the dreams beyond the worshiping community that's here and the school that was here. It's not having the same impact on the appeal. We then switched to 2-year appeals, again having people coming and going so quickly. If you wait 3 years, somebody could join the congregation, 3 years later leave it, and never get a Vision for Mission program. That's why we went to 2 years, and the appeal average for 2 years was $306,000 per year. The next year, it dropped down, $237,000. $227,000 is the annual cost of the mortgage. It is at that point in 2017 when the council, evaluating all of what's going on, recognizing the challenges, asked that we be able to sell part of the Lakeshore property. Started with 7 acres. That was approved. We could all look at the numbers and realize we're going to be challenged to continue to do this. The next year, if we look at ends with 2019, 18 and 19, that was the last year appeal, $505,000, which was up 6%. If you look at column R, there's where you see the average annual declining, 5.8%, 26%, up 8%, down 22%. So, because this is the appeal, current appeal is going to end on February of 21, do you remember off the top of your head when our mortgage ends? March of 31. So we have 5 to 6 more appeals to go, paying $500,000 in interest on what remains a $1.9 million debt on this property. So, Lord willing, if that is paid off 6 years from now, at that point, we begin to look at doing the other developments. We've had new members and members of the church who have joined and said, hey, let's get going on building that retreat center. Well, when we look as a council and as a congregation at the numbers, how much of the $100,000 in the building fund do you want to use to build something when the mortgage income drops by 25%? Meaning if it drops 25% again, we will be short $40,000 to pay the mortgage. So we couldn't in good conscience do some of the development while we still have this challenge in front of us. What you see, the last one listed there in column P, is an estimate. Going at the rate we're going, it would be about $508,000 received in this current appeal. And that may or may not be fulfilled. If you look to the left, you can find the cell E21. That was last month. The mortgage payment is $18,977, and the income was $14,000, which was not sufficient, so we took money out of savings. This last month, June, column F, row 21, shows the donations this last month were $9,903, which is about half the mortgage payment. And that minus 23, that is a comparison between the 9903, the third month, June of the second year of the appeal, compared to that brown group above. Last year, in that month, it was 14,000. So the council is well aware of the realities in the situation. We have been doing what we could. We have spoken with the sales agency. Fran and Eric are our two agents. Fran, a member of the church. Eric, I think I made him an associate member. I don't quite remember. I make just about anybody an associate member, but to be thoughtful and caring to our congregation. And for 2 years, we tried to sell Southside, and in the end could not, withdrew the sale, and ended up with both locations doing ministry. In this case, we have been attempting to sell between 7 and 12. 2018, the congregation approved the sale up to 12 acres. So we have 2 years, and we have not had one letter of intent. In the 2 years up at Southside, we had 4 letters of intent, all of which fell through. So I'm not sure it really matters that much. But the reality is we have had no one. People come on the property, see its beauty, but it does not fit most people's development ideas. We looked at parceling off 1 acre plots, but there are lots of things to be considered. For example, the lift station is over there, and the property we're selling is over there. And that part of the property is lower than this part, which makes it even more difficult when you're trying to develop the property. We went to JEA, but they will not allow us to share the lift station with somebody else. It was put in the piping with plans for more development. But the city will not, JEA will not allow us where we have part of the lift station, somebody else has part. Now it doesn't work. Who does JEA argue with? No, it's his job, it's his turn, and back and forth, so they won't allow it. They have to put in their own lift station. Ours cost, as I remember, about $100,000. So it adds to development costs for that property. So here we are. We still owe $1.9 million. We have about 10 years to put this to rest with the mortgage with Thrivent. And by the way, there are lots of little things all over the place. If we were to sell 7 acres or 12 acres, all of that money has to go to Thrivent. They're holding the mortgage. And so in the papers we signed, we agreed that all money received for the land would go to them. So even selling the 7 or 12 will not allow us to take that money and develop more property or develop more things. So one of the questions that is in front of us, the dreams that we had about this property have one by one been kind of removed. So we talked about a retirement center. We met with architects, we met with developers, we met with HUD 202 people, where they provide $9 million and you go ahead and build it. And we had ideas on how we could help the elderly in those places, almost like maybe I don't know that it compares, but something like Cathedral Towers, special needs, low income. Some of us were ready to move into the top floor. But that, we were not able to find anybody willing to do that. The high school, we have found that will not be possible. Even if we had the opportunity, there are too many things that are different between elementary and high school. And so without the high school, we do not need the ball fields, we do not need the land that was estimated about 5 acres or more for the school. At this point, Madeline will also be describing a change, a recommended change for the school. The question, let me see, anything else we were going to do at the retreat center, ELCA put in one not about an hour or so down the road. And we did meet with people trying to get the information, especially trying to find out why they were closing. So Woodlands, the Missouri Synod historic retreat center, with special places you can park your trailer and your camper, very well developed. They sold it. They sold it, and they're near Orlando. They couldn't get it to balance. So question whether we could really develop and become a retreat center. So the question that gets raised, if we did not own the Lakeshore now, would we go to buy it? Let's say our entire congregation was up at Southside and it's starting to flood, overflow, and the parking and the seating again. Would we look for land? I think in general, we are mission-oriented. We would try to do that. We would try to plant somewhere else. Would we plant in an industrial park? I mean, nobody counted that as a favorable part of the land, but it allowed it to be purchased. It was affordable. This property, $40,000 an acre. The land we saw just prior to it, up at Bay Meadows in 95, that owner would sell us the land. We could have bought 40 acres, but the cost was $25 a square foot, which when you do the math on it, 43,560 times 25 is $1,089,000 per acre. $1,000,000 an acre, $800,000 up on Kernan an acre, $400,000 was the lowest we had prior to this, up on A.C. Skinner, and then Joe offers us $40,000 an acre. So it was affordable, it was developable. We could put anything on this property that we had dreamed about. It was accessible because of 95, Phillips Highway, Greenland Road, all the rest, but it was not visible. And that has challenged us. But would we buy 40 acres and would we buy this property? As beautiful as it is, as much as it allows us to do ministry in so many ways, is it something we could afford to do, even if we wanted to, at $18,977 a month for another $2 million? That's the question. So we have tried to sell portions of it. What we have found, the last two companies that have come in to look at the property, saw that there is more to it, because we take them over and we say it's the land over there and on the other side of the lake, and they looked at the 40 acres, and those two said they were interested. One could not afford it. We did try to, thankfully Fran and Eric were able to put comparables and everything else on the property and tell us what that property could or comparably should be sold for. What's its value? As honestly as they can come to it, it is about $4 million. Now ultimately it's only worth what somebody will pay, but the numbers are there. We do not know. We have been in conversation with one group that could not afford it, and then the other group that is very much interested has gone back and forth with amounts, with us justifying what we thought it was. And we have made no offer. We cannot as a council, but what we're trying to do is to bring it to a point where we can make a recommendation to the congregation. And if it proceeds, the council is unanimously in agreement that if this company responds favorably and agrees to that, it would be something we would recommend to the congregation. Selling this entire property, taking the assets, which would be with $2 million still owed, about $4 million, you round it off to the nearest million. So somewhere around $1.5 million to $2 million of assets to be able to use in finding a place that is specific to our dreams today, not the dreams from 2003, 17 years ago. So the council is looking at that, wanted to bring the information to you. Not an easy way to do it. There isn't anybody on the council who doesn't understand the beauty of this. There aren't many, and many of the, I know the pastors better than anybody else, there aren't any pastors who haven't been injured and left body parts somewhere on this property in the development of everything that we have done. And we would do it again. This was not a wasted 15, 16 years. This was the opportunity for us to do ministry in extraordinary ways. Again, if you remember from Vision for Mission, about 250 people a week, not members of this church, are on this property, or used to be before COVID, used to be on the property benefiting from the beauty. They did. And that was our gift to them. And my assumption is, as we bring people together to look at what we would use next, many of the guidelines that we had, I think, would still be used. Needs to be affordable, needs to be developable, it needs to be accessible, and God help us all, it needs to be visible. And if we can find property to the size that we need, is that 4 or 5 acres, not 40? We'll figure that out. What are we going to do? How will we do it? Where will we do it? All that is yet to come, but that's only possible if this property is sold. Otherwise, the rest is before us, and we'll continue on with that. Okay. Fran, I know Fran is here. We do have a microphone in the front. I think I've finished what I can well finish. If you have questions for me or for Fran, Fran, of course, is the Colliers-Dickinson person who knows everything about land and values and what has happened. You can either come up here, or if you want to be at that, there's a mic, I'll give you mine. So, if you want to put that, clip that somewhere.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Fran Pepis, and for those that are not aware of who I am, I joined Shepherd of the Woods back in 1989, and I have been part of what we would call the Location and Development Committee since 2006. So my company is a commercial real estate company here in Jacksonville. We've had 47 years of experience with the Jacksonville market, and I have been with that company for 38 years as a principal owner and operator for that company. So when Shepherd of the Woods was out looking for development of a new site, I was involved very much in the development and the location selection process of our Lakeshore property. So Pastor was very explicit and very detailed on his numbers, and our process to be able to value a property is very similar to what an appraiser would do, except we don't get into the weeds of an appraisal. We don't get into the area, the schools, the population. That church council does that, and the committees do that when we select a site. But when we look at the value of a property, we basically take the property itself, and number 1 is the location. Number 2 is the zoning on the property. And number 3 is how can it be developed under that zoning code. The zoning for this property is pretty obvious. It's industrial. It sits in an industrial park. And when we purchased the property back in 2006, we really had to get a modification to that zoning so that we could build a number of buildings on this property. So we converted it from industrial to what they call planned unit development. So we have a multitude of properties and buildings on an industrial piece of land. That holds value to this property. We looked at that as brokers when we were assessing the value, as well as the development rights that we still have on this property that have been in reserve since 2006, adds value to the property, as well as the structures. Ironically enough, although the structures, as beautiful as they are and as they've been very well used for our congregation, don't have much value for the end user. We've noticed that in an industrial park, most times metal buildings are pretty well constructed, most times they're air conditioned, and most times the value of the land is more valuable than the building itself or the improvements. So we took a look at that. We also took a look at how much money we've put into the property with regards to infrastructure. When we have well over, I think, $500,000 plus in value of infrastructure, water, sewer, electric, lift station, all that is really important to anyone who's developing a piece of raw land. So we took that into consideration when we priced up the property. We originally had the 12 acres, which is behind us, priced at a value of about $150,000 an acre for the 12 acres. And we did, in fact, Pastor, have one person make an offer. We put the property on the market back in 2018 when the congregation gave us approval to market the 12 acres. Our neighbor next door did place an offer on the property back in 2018, and he put a value of $1.9 million on that 12 acres. And for 1 year, we went through the process of him determining whether or not the property was suitable for an expansion of his business next door. He actually wanted to put some warehousing out here, and he wanted to put some storage. Sort of what you see on Greenland Road. As you come into Fayal, you'll see a very large piece of property on Greenland Road that's converted into a recreational storage warehouse environment. When that property was sold on Greenland Road, and that owner of that property decided to do what our next door neighbor was wanting to do for this property, he got concerned and felt his project would fail since the project on Greenland Road had been sold and had already been reserved for RVs and trucks and campers and things of that nature. So after 12 months of going through development stages with him, going through the city of Jacksonville, working with his engineers, his architects, his contractors, he pulled the plug at the 11th hour. So back in February of 2019, we put the 12 acres back out in the market and had several levels of interest, but no one really, except what we call tire kickers, until recently, when we've had two people, as Pastor had mentioned, come to the property and show strong interest. One was not capable financially of moving forward, and the second potential buyer is very interested and very well capitalized. Does anybody have any questions? We have a microphone up here if anyone has any questions about the property, the value, the timing, or... Yes, good. You want the microphone back?
Oh, Sherry's got one. We'll see.
I wanted to see, has it been explored to sell Southside versus Lakeshore? And what that would be worth, and if that would garner enough funds to keep the Lakeshore, plus be able to find a different property versus Southside.
I would have to say, that I think that would be a hard road to hoe, partly because of the 2-year attempt in the past that garnered no support. There are difficulties involved with this location. Every location has some. We have a lot of problems trying to sell that property. It is 2.75 acres. So this may be too large for most people. That one, anything you ever do on the property, you need to go before City Council, get an exemption, because we don't own 4 acres. It's a residential zoning. And we had one person that was interested in doing something with it, putting in condos, but it didn't work in the business plan going just 2 acres, and 2 acres is all, 2 levels, 2 stories, and 2 stories is the maximum height. We have a retention pond, although we never have water in it. It is required the first 75 or now 100 feet of our property is lost. 2.75 acres is 200 feet by 600 feet. So when you lose 100 by 150 at the front, you don't have a lot of usable space left. So the last one to try to buy it was the Missouri Synod, and they were going to try to put their high school in there. And I don't know what took them so long, when they finally crunched the numbers, it wasn't feasible to take on 2.7.
I agree with that. I'm just asking that, that was a long time ago, correct?
The attempt to sell the Southside was 2003,
Yeah,
2 years before this was born.
That was a long time ago.
Seems like yesterday.
I would definitely like to see what the value of that is, and if it's worth, land on that strip has got to be worth a tremendous amount. Way more than this, way more.
Yeah, as I said back then, it was $400,000 an acre, but again, it's only worth what somebody will pay for it. But certainly we can look into it to see if it is a value. If, for example, it could be sold, which it wasn't before, for $2.7 million, with our debt here, that's about $2 million in debt, so it would not allow a lot for beginning something somewhere else if this property was sold.
Right, but I think prices have gone up significantly since 2003.
Yeah.
With
Well-
land. Yes. Yes.
Yes, prices have gone up significantly since 2003. With COVID, though, we are noticing property values are starting to plane off, and in some cases, we're going to have what we would call panic sales. Once the panic sales hit, not foreclosures, because the appraisers don't take foreclosures into consideration when they value a property, but the panic sellers are those that can't afford the mortgages and will begin to sell them to what we call bottom feeders. So when that happens, then the value of land, when the appraisers look at the value of land, will be affected as we move forward through this unprecedented kind of economy that we're in right now.
The other aspect of this is selling one or the other. That property has about 20-something thousand square feet of facilities. And this one in that building is 6,800, and that's the primary building that we have. So it's one thing, this community will figure out, the worshiping community here, where they go, what they do if that happens. But one option is to go to Southside, take the middle service time that's basically not very well attended, but you could lift up the community here and move their ministry to Southside, and it would fit. You cannot take the ministry of Southside and move it here and be without that.
Even with several worship times?
Well, I wasn't thinking just of the worship. I was thinking more of all the operations, all of the school, all the rest that happens. Well, we certainly can take a look at it. That has not been considered.
And the other question is, I know there are many of us who have come to join the congregation after the original master plan was done. We have been told that, we don't really want to vary from that because so many people have put into that ideas. I think we need to, before we sell this place, we will never, ever find another piece of property like this that we can afford. We just won't. Maybe 5 acres that we like, but we'll never find 40 acres. And I think we need to all come together and say, okay, that was the goals then. Those goals aren't realistic now. So if money wasn't such an issue, what would the goals be here? What would the plan be? If we could put our money towards concrete things that we could actually see some revival here, what would that look like? And I don't believe that's been done. And I don't want to give this up to try to find another piece of land somewhere that the dreams that only could be held on these 40 acres, we could see actually happen?
The very center of the dreams is the worshiping community. And that's the part that has not worked in 16 years. That are, if this were a plant from a national church body, they would have pulled the plug on it. We're not trying to cast any aspersions. The reality is that the people who joined here, I think to a person, first met Southside. They were at Southside and came down here. I think that's true. If it's not, correct me. Yeah, pastor says it is. So here we are, 16 years into the project, and we have 50 worshipers per week. And 50 cannot support what are the expenses and insurance and utilities and maintenance and repair and all the rest of it. Generally, as I say, the denomination, when they do it, they have a projection. What will your growth be, and when will you be off subsidy? Because we're part of the same church, we don't consider it as subsidy. But the reality is the growth of the Lakeshore has not, for a while we had, again, once it was up at 90 worshipers, we really felt that as if that was going to continue, but it did not. And it got up to 90, that was the maximum for two years, and then declined down to the 50s. And that's, very honestly, it's not sustainable. You couldn't get a pastor, one pastor here, and the expenses and maintain. So the question is whether, not whether there ought to be another community. We try to maintain and care for the community and assist and do all our things together. But, what is affordable for the entire congregation for the expenses that are involved.
I guess again, I would like to, has a questionnaire ever been put out? Why do you choose one location over another? And if it's because they see this property downgrading instead of upgrading, I'd like to know that. It seems like, the bulk of yes, Southside is nicer. Is that the only thing that makes people not want to come here is because it's got the nicer building, it's got the nicer, church, it's got better music, system, not better music, but better music systems. Why are people still going to Southside versus Lakeshore? And is there anything that we could draw people to Lakeshore for? Is it feasible? Are the outdoor drive-in things going as well for Southside as here? Are they holding their attendance as high as here?
Percentage-wise, Lakeshore is a little bit higher than what had been the past.
Okay.
So sitting in the church, those numbers were a little lower than the ones at Southside. The number of people in cars is a little less than what their previous worship attendance was. And there are lots of reasons, and we can certainly go through it. We have tried 16 years. We have done everything we could to try to develop this property and encourage people. So we have picnics down here. We have mostly older people. This is a younger group of people with kids. The kids go run out on the lawn. Older people do not run on the lawn. We can't get them. We offer rides. We're going to have a picnic. We're going to do an ice cream social. We're going to do blessing of animals. We'll give you a ride down there. You only have to trip once on a route, and they don't come back.
I understand that, but the older, and if Southside, or if Lakeshore is more geared for younger families, are we doing ourselves a disservice? Because the older people, they will reach a point where they won't be coming to either location. Just some questions to think about.
Yep. Sue is wandering up, running up.
Sorry about that. Good morning. A couple of questions. Is it an all or nothing proposition? Has there been any thought to selling 20 acres instead of the entire 40 acres? Is there any interest in that? And my second question, just to take up the whole time, if we do end up selling the 40 acres, what are we going to do with this part of the school?
I don't know if Madeline's here, whether she wants to answer the question. Madeline is here. Oh, yes, there she is. Sure, sure. What was the first? I saw the word.
Thanks, Sue. The 12 acres wasn't decided by our congregation. The 12 acres was decided by the first buyer that came through to the property, which was our next door neighbor. And when he platted out what he needed for his warehouse and outside storage yard, it came to 12 acres. And then when we platted it out, it took the back of the property and almost a third or more of our retention pond. That's how we came up with the 12 acres. Subsequent to that, we've had other developers on site looking at 12 acres, plus, minus. No one was really engaged to be able to say, yes, that's suitable for what I need. Because in doing that, the development of the backside of the property and then making the turn to an L shape around the retention pond makes it difficult for that kind of development without taking the creme de creme, which we have from that 12 acres moving forward. The value of the property is really from that road moving this way and going towards that way. We were just kind of selling off excess land that didn't have much value at the time, and that's how we determined that 12 acres. Since then, we've not had anyone come forward interested in 12 plus or 12 minus acres. I think Madeline will talk to you about the school.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for considering the school in this. We have, over the last 3 to 5 years, have seen lower elementary enrollment. 2 years ago, we considered combining the school over at Southside because of that, but it just didn't work out right. This right now, along with COVID, we are very capable of combining both campuses into Southside, and actually it would be a blessing for us. With our student population as it is now, for me to go between two campuses and provide the amount of support that is necessary really is not possible, and the financial aspect of having an additional administrator is not possible. So I'm excited about having the opportunity to have all of the schools together at one campus. There is some modifications that need to be made at the Southside campus to make that possible. But it is definitely something that is very doable. I have spoken to our parents and everybody's on board about it. It's what we do, not where we're at, that they come to our school, and they are fine with whatever campus we feel we can serve them best at.
All right, well, I guess you can tell some of us are really passionate about this property, and I'm going to have to go home with her, so I got to be careful, all right? First of all, I think many of you know we love this property, and it's going to be hard for me to even talk about it. The reality is, yes, I'll agree with Sherry, and I think a lot of people here can agree as well, Southside's worth a lot more money than this property is. I don't care whether it's COVID or not, we're one of the fastest growing cities in the country right now. And considering I'm in development, I can tell you where things are going. The reality is, though, selling Southside is not a reality. It just wouldn't make sense for our congregation. We wouldn't pick up and come here. Infrastructure's not here to do that. It just wouldn't make sense. However, we have been blessed with the jewel. God blessed us how many years ago with this property? 16 years ago. We say it all the time. He knows what's happening. He knows he has a plan. I've often asked him for that manual, and he never gives it to me. The reality is he has a plan. It might not be our plan. As much as we would love to have done many different things with this property, it's just not going to happen. The reality is, if we can get what we can get for this property, we need to put it in God's hands. But then, when we get that, I think what we need to do is we have to look at where does he want us to go next. And I think this congregation has to get together because of the times that we're facing. We need to sit down and we need to figure out where we need to plant another church that will continue to take his message to those that need to hear it right now. So if it comes down to having to sell this piece of property to do that, then so be it. And maybe we'll be blessed, he'll put us in another place, or he'll find somebody that wants to swap property or something to that effect, to where maybe we can get another place that's almost as beautiful as this, that we can continue some of those dreams that some of us had. But in my opinion, I think what we need to do is to sit down and take a hard look at what's available and do what we need to do.
Gee, who's my nubby? All right, any other questions or comments? I think I would like to suggest that I think everybody knows the beauty of this property and the dreams that we had, and it's why the other group that came in was looking at it, because it is a place where we can see the hand of God. It's not the only place the hand of God functions. You know, the question, what do we do at this point? Are we leaving something behind? If we are, and if that's necessary, for what reason? Are we doing it because we're being lazy? I've been called lots of things. I'm not sure lazy's ever been one of them. We try to use everything God gives us, and the question can be asked whether the best thing he gave us in this property is land that we bought for $40,000 that's now of significantly greater value, that allows us to develop and to purchase land and develop a property where word and sacrament can be shared. It has just been a long, hard road for the development here. And there isn't anybody other than the pastors, beyond the pastors, who would want more for this place. I mean, we have led worship in that tent and in that barn and out in the fields. And we described what the possibilities we hoped were going to be. But that did not happen. And holding on to a beautiful property that is not giving us the opportunity to share the gospel with lots of other people. Every person is valuable. But if instead of 50 people a week, or to be averaging 50 means there are Sundays with 25. And as beautiful as this is, it is not affordable at that rate for us to maintain it. And it is, you know, if we're able to get resources that allow us to develop a ministry that reaches more people, that is the reason we were willing to sell Southside back in 2003. How do we reach people? And hopefully that will be the end result of this. All right, any other comments or questions? Oh, yep. Sherry's got a quick one. We're not running out of airtime. Make it a slow one.
Station down there, is that the pump station?
No,
Where is the pump station?
right there. to the right of the bus, to the left of the modular, behind that.
Okay. Has it ever been explored to sell that portion? That would include the pump station?
Yeah.
And we don't really, I mean, if the schools are gonna be combined anyways, and is that a portion of land that still leaves this area in the lake available?
Yeah, we really have looked a lot. We didn't go through everything. We didn't get 40 acres of usable land when we bought this property. We always round it up and we say, well, it's 40. Actually, it's 39. But you can't build anything on the lake. But you can't build anything on the wetlands.
Okay,
So
there's
right over
wetlands
there,
down
there's wetlands.
Okay.
And wetlands on the back corner. And giving them the pump station would just mean we have to build another one ourselves.
Right, it would only make sense if we got enough for the property to negate the debt and put in a new pump station. I agree. It's just, how much of the land is not wetlands that goes on that side?
We have about 28 acres of developable land, not including the wetlands or the pond.
Right, but what section of the wetlands is over there?
I think we have about 6 acres, about 6 acres.
Out
The total wetlands, we have a little slip on that side, but all 6 acres is over here. Going
Right.
on angle by the fire pit.
of, right, but I'm asking from the entrance all along this side.
You see where that fence is behind the modular?
Yes.
Everything on the far side is not ours, it's his,
Right.
Eric's. So the only distance we have is like from the sidewalk to the trees. That's where the wetlands are. So there isn't a lot of room to develop. There wouldn't be room between the building and the wetlands to add another one. Yeah, it is a great piece of property for picnic, for woodland, etc. But when you try to build on it, that's our problem. Okay, any other comments or questions? I hope you will be, understanding of the challenges that are before us. And none of the council or the pastors take any of this lightly. We have given heart, soul, and mind into the development of this property, using it in every way we can. Not many of you make it out to the pumpkin patch. Not many of you do. We live here trying to get that done. Do you know why we do the pumpkin patch? We don't make a penny off the pumpkins. That money goes to some ministry somewhere. Why do we do it? To try to get people on this property. Nobody is going to wander by. So we do a project that brings 1,100 people onto this property at the same time. And all the pastors are there, and all the staff are there, and we're working ourselves crazy, interacting with people. We ask you all to come, wear your t-shirts so they know you're part of the congregation. Why are we doing it? So they know the church exists here. Do you know how many people who, upon meeting us at a pumpkin patch, later joined the congregation? None. Zero. We have no record of anybody coming to the pumpkin patch. I'm beginning to ask myself the question, okay, if the goal is so people know the church is here, that has been ineffective. Every year we've done it. It has not accomplished that goal. If we're saying the goal is to support other agencies and stuff, good to go. We have done that well. But there are times we have nigh killed ourselves trying to get this place developed. We have no limits on the groups. What's the number one user of the property? Girl Scouts. Girl Scouts. And we've got Boy Scouts, and we've got every group that we can possibly. And again, a side effect, maybe somebody who's looking for a church now knows worship here on Sunday at 10 o'clock. People can come here, they can go to Southside, they can choose. can't force them, we encourage. We started by asking a group of people, including, I don't know if Tim is here. Where's Tim Rowland? Tim Rowland was one of the people I went to specifically. I said, Kim, you're doing me a favor. I think it was 3 months. 3 months. Would you come and be part of the founding group at the Lakeshore? So we get a critical mass of people, which is 50 people. And people volunteered, Darren Sullivan and other people from all over the congregation. They came here to be the seed of the beginning of this. But the reality is, okay, I've read books till I can write them. If you've got ideas of the ways you think people will come here, if we haven't tried it, I'll give you $1. If it's a brand new idea that we have not read through, considered, troubled ourselves, how do we make the grounds so that it's safe for people? We have congregational meetings out here to try to encourage, twist arms to get people. We have members at Southside who have never been here. We can't force them. So it's part of dreams for all of us. And we worked really hard. We never missed out on an opportunity to try to get this place developed. And the reality is another thing. So it'd be good to be able to put the time, energy into a place that in some ways can be more effective for the mission and the ministry. And how that happens, God help us find it. But we are concerned about the mission and the vision, and hopefully we can come to agreement on that. All right, anybody else? Thank you very much for your time. If you have questions, please do not screw this up and be abusive of a council member. You may know who they are. Please be gentle. None of it's easy for any of us. If you have a hot idea, bring it forward. We appreciate that. Sherry, we're going to look into it and see what that would mean, how we would go about doing that if we could. So if you've got some other ideas for us, if we haven't tried, we'd be glad to. All right. I thank you very much. Pastor Phillips, by the way, many years ago we agreed that, and we went to Virginia, we went to Fargo, North Dakota. On purpose. Had a member paid for Pastor Phillips and I to go there, and we met with the pastor and the administrators because they were doing multi-site ministry. And before we ever suggested it here, we saw what it looked like there, and what are the challenges and the opportunities and everything else. And one of the things in another conference we had that's clear is you need a campus pastor. Anybody want to guess who we selected as the campus pastor at Lakeshore?
Pick me.
And she's done a phenomenal job, but it is a challenge. Anyway, thank you very much, Pastor.
Yes, this is absolutely a heart matter as well. And trust me, I have shed some tears over this idea or concept, and it's come to us kind of out of the blue here. But at the same time, I also shed tears for those who've not heard yet, who've not heard the good news of Jesus Christ, who haven't found us yet. I look at the Lakeshore, and I see that, yes, the land has potential, but we, as the people of God, have amazing potential. We are a committed group of people down here that will do whatever it takes, including setting up for hours, musicians and microphones. We will mow lawns all week long. Okay, we're a little due, so if you want to volunteer this week, let us know. But we are willing to sweat out here. And I have left some sweat down here, including today. And so it has been my life. I have lived, eaten, and breathed this community down here. You are my people, and but I also know that there are people who have yet to hear, and people who have yet to see what is possible in the kingdom of God. And so while I grieve the idea, I also look at hope, much like I can imagine the Israelites, right? They were wandering for 40 years. Thank God this isn't 40 years, right? But there's a promised land, and we have been positioned, and we have been faithful and faith-filled in our journey here at the Lakeshore, and all of its beauty, and all of its people, and all of its witness, and everything else. And I can't help but to dream of the future and to know what is possible down the road. So I know this comes as a hard conversation, and it takes time to process it. So I join you in prayer of your discernment of all of this. And we've had a little bit of time processing all of this, and it is a hard conversation. But our ministry that God calls us to isn't always easy, and the places He sends us aren't always easy. The ministry He calls us to aren't always easy. Well, who am I kidding? Generally speaking, it's not easy. But with Him, all things are possible. With Him, His love is shared. With Him, His light comes through the trees all the time and comes through each of us. So, are we ready for a closing prayer?
Yeah.
I'm not going to get all preachy on you, so let's go ahead and close with a prayer. And Lord, we are so grateful for the beauty of this place, for the beauty of the people that you have brought here, for the amazing ministry that we have been doing here and will continue to do. And while we know these items are tough to consider and discern, we know that you are a faithful God. So we pray, Lord, that you would open our hearts and our minds to see what it is you're calling us to do, to be faithful in what it is you call us to do. Because, Lord, as a prayer usually says, you do call us to ventures of which we cannot see the ending, by paths as yet untrodden, and even through perils unknown. But we do go out with good faith, because your hand is leading us and your love supporting us. So, Lord, we pray an outpouring of your Holy Spirit upon this church, upon the people here that might be able to understand what it means to be in mission for you, to know that it will be uncomfortable at times. So help us to be faithful, Lord. And as we leave here, bless us and bring peace to our hearts and our minds in all things. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Now we go in peace to serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.